another final week of lives before election. Tuesday, August 23rd. Go out there and vote. We've been dealing with a lot of stuff over the last 2 years, and we have said over and over and over again things that need to be fixed, things that need to be changed. That can all happen as long as everybody gets out and votes. So, we talk about leadership in this community, and the leadership, I've said it over and over, the leadership starts with the citizens getting out and telling our elected officials what we want. And this next Tuesday, we'll start with telling our elected officials who we want to be in running the show. So we're going to talk about the airport, and I've got a motley crew of very knowledgeable young men that are going to share their thoughts on what's been going on out at the airport, what the future of the airport is, the economic development of the airport. So if that's something that interests you, then definitely stick around, and we'll get into it in just a second. If you are with me live, then somebody put in comments that you can hear me. I guess we'll just talk about a few things real quick while we're waiting on folks to jump on. Please go ahead, and if you've got a question, get that into the comments, and we'll do the best we can to work that into the conversation. And if you've got the time, please hit that like or share button, please, and tag somebody that might be interested in talking about the airport. So I'll start with, I've got Mr. John Floyd sitting next to me. John, thank you for coming in.
Thank you for inviting me.
If you guys haven't read any of John's articles, but you've been following the rendering plant, then I don't know what you've been doing. You've probably missed a lot, because I think all of us have anxiously waited for the articles every weekend for the last 2 years, and I know you've been writing a lot longer than this rendering plant stuff has been going on. So looking forward to having you in here. Russ Vanstory, talk about somebody that's got a strong tie to that airport. You learned how to fly out there.
Learned how to fly there about 48 years ago.
48 years ago. So you've got 4 or 5 hours in airplanes, and just recently retired from FedEx, right?
That's correct.
So live on the mountain.
Right.
You are a Gadsden voter. Is that? No, you were not. You were outside.
I'm a Floridian.
You're a Floridian. Got you. Saving on those state income taxes.
Well, it's warmer down there in the winter.
Well, then I guess you're an outsider like me. But still.
That's why they have zoning laws. Sometimes people do something next door that impacts you, even if you're not over the right line.
Well, no less. You've got a long time, so you learned to fly out at the Gadsden Airport, and I've got a lot of insights of what has transpired, what has been out there, and obviously, and why I really wanted to have you in here is the FedEx expertise. You've been some places, seen some things. And I do want to, kind of point out, so you were not a military guy that transitioned into flying for FedEx or the airlines.
No, and I don't speak for FedEx nowadays.
Absolutely. Don't speak. But the value for us though is that you did it for a long time and you understand that side of the aviation industry at least more than all the rest of us in the community, and that's a valuable thing for us to hopefully, it's amazing. We've got a lot of people now that after 2 years that didn't even know we had an airport. Now they know terms like BASH and wildlife hazards, and we've talked about approach minimums and all of the crazy stuff. So looking forward to getting some insights from you. And then Ken Robertson, huge thank you for coming in. You are a member of the GAA who has been sticking it out, and massive appreciation. I know you kind of stuck your neck out there, and I'm sure it hadn't been fun. and we're not going to get into all of those juicy details, but you bring a lot of great perspective as a board member of the GAA, seeing how it's run. Well-respected attorney and judge. You've done some judge work. Is that
31 years?
All right. So you've got some unique insight into just the air, and I know you've been looking deep into the airport structure, the laws around airport governance, and all of that kind of stuff. And then, of course, you're a pilot. So thanks for coming in.
Well, thank you for having me.
I think I see you fly down to Florida quite a bit,
Orange Beach, Gulf Shores.
Orange Beach. Yeah. Okay.
I also did my flight training, a big majority of my flight training at Gadsden.
Okay.
Originally.
And you are commercial rated?
I'm commercial rated, land and sea.
All right. Did you ever get your seaplane rating, Russ?
I do.
Nice.
Single and multi-engine.
All right. So we'll jump in. Guys, if you've got questions, then please get them up there, and we'll try and so we talked before we were getting on that with this group there's a lot that we could cover, and I think where I want to start, and we're going to really try to not get in the weeds of airplane geekery, although I think we could, and hopefully Mr. Floyd would not fall asleep on us talking about fun airplane stories. But the economic development of the airport, what's the way forward? Where do we go from here? And I definitely want to make sure that we touch on the meeting that you and I attended last week, which I think kind of sums up a lot of the conversation that needs to be had in the community. And that was a discussion with all of our state representatives, Senator Andrew Jones, Congressman Adderholt, Mayor Taylor, Mayor Snyder, Jason Wilson came in as a council member, and had a great conversation led by Heather New, talking about some ideas and commitment to let's look at the airport and the IDA and how those can be restructured. So I guess I'd start with what were kind of your takeaways out of that discussion in terms of what people need to understand, because you had a lot of value add from the GAA perspective.
Sure. Let me say this first. I appreciate Heather New putting that round table together. It was a group of people that have interest in the community and the airport, and it was a great meeting. We had people that can make changes, that can do it, that committed that day to make changes. In that meeting, we discussed the structure of the GAA, the structure of the FBO, the boards. I gave my opinion. I don't know if you want my opinion now, but I gave my opinion that day as to what I think the GAA needs to be and what the FBO board needs to be in the future. Just a brief synopsis. I said that the board, the GAA, should be, if it continues to exist as it is, it needs to be appointments made by surrounding municipalities and the Etowah County, anyone that has an interest in the airport. I think Gadsden should have an appointment to the board. Etowah should have an appointment to the board. Rainbow City should have an appointment to the board. Southside, they all should have an appointment to the board, so their interest is protected. But yeah, the airport at Gadsden has a great potential for growth. It's sat idle for many, many years. Senator or Congressman Adderholt asked the other day how long it had been since we had a commuter flight in, and I told him sometime in the 70s, but I was incorrect. It was actually sometime in the 90s, because there's a crash that happened in 1990, I think. Where,
ASA.
ASA. And it was a commuter flight, Delta Connect. They were flying for Delta Connect, and I actually had a mid-air collision. They survived with just minor injuries to their plane, but the 172 for the Civil Air Patrol actually had 2 fatalities. Mm. So we did have commuter flights coming in the 90s, and shortly after that crash, they discontinued their flights into Gadsden. But all that can come back to Gadsden.
I believe those were probably subsidized back then too, though.
I was just going to ask how much you're. I know you were not necessarily an airline guy, but it's not like the major aviation side is all that big of a community. But
you don't think they're going to bring a big pickup truck in here to get the money?
Yeah, and a lot of people don't understand when we talk about regional, aircraft servicing our airport. Can you talk about the subsidies and kind of how that works on, what?
Well, back before roughly 1978, there were a lot of subsidies, and there were economic development incentives where you had to, where the government basically wanted to give air service into small communities. And I spoke to the head of ASA in person one day, and he says, I'd love to get out of that because they didn't want the subsidies. They wanted to go elsewhere where they could make more money.
Gotcha. And that's got a lot to do with the fact that basically there's not enough people to pay for enough tickets to make it worth the while. And so they're subsidized by, so, and I guess I would, I'll roll over to, so you've been looking at this airport, Mr. Floyd, for a couple of years, and have asked a lot of very insightful questions. Some information you've gotten, some information you haven't. But what are your thoughts when you look at what is the development, what's the potential of the Gadsden Airport?
Well, first, let me correct you on one thing.
Okay.
You said I would be bored with this discussion on aviation. I got news for you. I'm an old aviation nut. As a matter of fact, I flew on corporate jets for 7 years when I was the executive vice president of General Tire.
I stand corrected.
I spent a lot of time on airplanes. And I have one of my best friends was a former member of the Blue Angels. So he educated me on the Blue Angels and their performance and their narration for the country. Now, what was the question?
Well, so what do you look at as you've been looking at the airport through the lens of economic development? Where do you think the airport needs to go?
When you talk about economic development for the airport, there is none. I can't remember. I haven't heard any economic development conversations emanating from anybody associated with the airport. The Grissom Air Force Base in Indiana only recently went joint use. And when they went joint use, they got a painting operation to come in there who hired probably 200 people to begin with. And I think they're up to 600 people now because Baldwin Aviation. So I think that the potential for economic development at the Gadsden Airport is vast. Somebody just has to get off their butt and get out and do the job of economic development for the airport. The IDA doesn't seem to be interested in the airport. We need somebody, and we got to change the structure of the management of the airport. It has to be more responsible to some entity, whether it's a mayor, whether it's a combination of municipalities in the area or what. But economic development at the airport is non-existent now, and I think any effort that is made is going to be a positive.
So you're setting the bar pretty low. Just do something.
Yes.
Well, I don't know that there's that many people that would argue with that. Just do something.
I mean, is there even a master plan?
Oh, no. Not that I've seen. Have you seen?
Not. And generally, just throw this out there, generally our meetings, I mean, people that attend the meetings can see, but generally our meetings consist of, I'm talking about the meetings for the GAA, they consist of approving minutes from the prior meeting, approving the financials, which are handed out that particular day. The board members actually see all this stuff that day. And then that's it, unless we go into executive session to talk about other things. But generally that's our meeting. And that's not, you can't operate an airport where that's your total meeting. And that's all the time you have for the board members to discuss the needs and a master plan or anything to do with the airport.
Well, and I know, we've talked a lot about master plan, which I think that airport master plan, I mean, that has got to be incorporated into a city of Gadsden master plan as things stand right now. And I would go so far as to say it needs to be part of a countywide. And I think a lot of people that aren't familiar with aviation don't understand that airport is it's not just the land masses that touch it. Like it is a regional, it is a size of an airport that could, I mean, it impacts Fort Payne. You know, people that if you got bad weather and stuff at Fort Payne, they're coming into our airport. I mean, it should be a regional asset and thought of and incorporated into. And this is where, you know, you mentioned you spend a lot of time flying around, but I mean, you got a lot of companies in the region that are doing business here, and you know, airports are used to move executives, you know, parts that are emergency stuff. I mean, that's you know, that's something that needs to be thought of and incorporated, right?
Oh, I agree.
Absolutely.
So, which I guess, so we'll let's jump into a lot of people saying, how do we get FedEx? Why don't we have, you know, FedEx? And I know it's easy to look at, we've got a lot of land out there, which also if we just do something, we've got a lot of land that we can develop. And how many airports are there in, you know, a couple 100 miles of here that have that much open undeveloped space?
I can tell you. Gadsden has 1,480 acres. Huntsville has 6,000 acres. That's the international airport,
Right.
which is growing. They need it. They saved it. Montgomery has 1,907 acres. Bessemer has 380 acres. Bessemer is one of the fastest growing airports, has massive growth. Tuscaloosa has 721 acres. Albertville has 77 acres. Very fast growing airport, expanding rapidly. Mobile downtown, which has Airbus, the manufacturing company for Airbus, they have 1,650 acres, similar to ours.
Yeah, but like Bessemer, a friend of mine owns an air service there, and they are very aggressive in training and stuff. I mean, they have a lot of.
Well, they have the training
operations.
facility and the testing facility now for the FAA at Bessemer.
Yep.
Wow. Yeah, actually, somebody brought up their son is going to Wallace State right now. So I mean, we can talk some about the flight school capability, and this is a lot of the insight of what's going on in the aviation world, the pilot demand. You know, what could Gadsden be with Gadsden State sitting here? Which Gadsden State used to have a pilot program, right?
It did.
Yes, I mean that's where I started.
So I'd like to hear your perspective, you know, as kind of the inside guy in the pilot world. And I kind of started off, and I made a point that you were not a military transition guy, because I know as a lot of my buddies that are pilots coming out of the military, our numbers of military pilots that are being produced that traditionally are going to go fill cockpits are lower than probably ever thought, but the demand for air service is getting higher and higher. So what does that look like to you? I mean,
you know, boy, I hope nobody quotes me on these. But, you know, I've seen numbers where they're going to be 30,000 shy worldwide by 2030. And you know, the military, I mean, you correct me if I'm wrong, this is my perception, they don't take in as many, and they hold them longer. So, you know, they don't flow back out to the airlines.
And now you've got more and more that are getting into UAVs. The Air Force, you know, you can be a pilot designee going into flight school, and you end up flying, you know, UAVs.
I used to run into a lot of those down in Puerto Rico. They, you know, they would come in their flight suit, and I'm going, you don't look very sweaty. You guys, because it's an air-conditioned building that I sit in.
But the opportunity, and I know, you know, you've also got other regions of the world like Asia, you know, China and the Middle East, that they don't have the infrastructure, they don't have the flight schools to build pilots, and so they've got a lot of folks coming over here.
Well, the pilot shortage kind of take a left turn. It doesn't have much to do with the Gadsden Airport particularly, but the FAA created this shortage.
Right.
When they raised the minimums to 1,500 with no avenue how to get there from, say, 300 hours, and then put the mandatory retirement age in, there's a big void there. And that's what you see, you know, now they were talking, I think, 65 to 68. Now they've kind of decided on 67. I don't think that's gone through yet, but that's just going to kick the can down the road.
And I think, to me, the so what for the Gadsden Airport is why, I mean, the Gadsden Airport to me is a pretty nice facility if you're going to do some flight training out of. in terms of the airspace location and proximity and all that kind of stuff.
All
And
the
you've got
training
Gadsden State,
aids.
right?
You've got great instrument aids. I mean, basically, you've got a strip mall out there that is unique to aviation. And you just don't have very many aviation vendors, so therefore you don't have very many aviation customers. And it's not an easy, lazy airport for pilots. It's like, I don't want to pump my own gas. I want to go have a Coke and a hamburger while the lineman pumps my gas. And I want to get back in a nice leather seat airplane with my good clothes on and smell like fuel for the next 300 miles. And everybody seems to want the United Deltas in here and stuff like that. I mean, you got to take the singles and the doubles. I mean, you don't hit a grand slam every time. There's multiple opportunities. I think there's only 2 A&P schools, airplane power plant mechanic schools in Alabama. Well, there's a lot of land out there.
Mm-hmm.
And, the pilot school, like I say, Wallace has got one. There's no reason I know of. And you've got opportunities. Why not see if Auburn wants to come up here and have an extension? It's 100 nautical miles. Great long cross-country qualifying leg for an Auburn student to come up here, bring an airplane, swap an airplane, let them take an airplane back down for maintenance. It's coming up on a scheduled check or something like that. It is a wonderful facility, almost totally unused at this point.
And one thing I was thinking too, this is kind of out there. I mean, but it could be quick. We could have a seaplane base here. There's only one seaplane base in Alabama, and that's down in Fairhope, and I don't think it's really functional.
I think my buddy in Bessemer's got a lake up there now.
You're talking about Weldon, right? Charles?
No, of course, now you're going to make me think of his name.
That's fine. It's okay.
Gordo is his nickname.
Well, Charles has
Joey
one.
Sanders.
Okay. But he has one out of Bessemer as well, and matter of fact, he's an FAA examiner now, but he has a seaplane flight school, and he does his training at Alexander City because there's not a lake around Bessemer, but we have that here in Gadsden.
Mm-hmm.
And we could have a seaplane training facility here easily in Gadsden and have a seaplane base. I'm sure the FAA would love to have one set up here. It doesn't have to be on the airport. It can be on Coosa River, just somewhere to land. They can truck fuel over to them, and I'm sure the seaplane pilots will love it.
I got mine down in Florida, Jack Brown's.
I do too.
I mean, it is like it's a magnet for pilots, and talk about hotel rooms and
Getting
restaurants.
back to economic development for just a minute, we have a non-performing asset in the Gadsden Airport. It's clear to see. What we need is somebody who has a vision. We need a vision written down someplace so somebody can follow it.
Tweak it, correct it, enhance it.
I agree completely.
Well, and I think I've talked to a number of folks that through the last 2 years that have gone from zero knowledge of aviation to, digging deep. And I think, there's a lot of people going, why are all these, pilots and airplane people, why are they so frustrated? Like so angry, and it's not that hard, I think is what people are starting to realize, that, the aviation, there's tons of opportunity. I mean, you speak the pilots, the demand in the aviation world is growing and growing. We've got A&P mechanics that live in Gadsden. They commute down to Birmingham because that's the only place they can get a job. And those are, I know when I was managing international jets, when we were open out at IJ, I mean, you're talking starting wages of $20, $24 an hour. You got a lot of guys that can easily make, 6 figures as mechanics. So
if we could market the place,
yeah.
Ken, correct me if I'm wrong, but aren't we subsidizing the airport to the tune of Gadsden taxpayer is subsidizing the airport to the tune of $1 million a year?
Oh, at least.
So that's $1 million a year that is going into the coffers out of the taxpayer's pocket. We need to eliminate that.
And that's I saw a comment in there about if you restructure with the county running and or however you could restructure that board, the concern about who's responsible for paying the tab, and I think to your point in terms of somebody having a vision and a plan, it needs to not be worrying about who's paying for it. It needs to be, how do we get it to where it pays for itself? Because that's the way an airport should be.
How do we get the car to run? We'll talk to the mechanic about payment later.
And obviously those details to get us there have got to be figured out. There is debt that has to be carried over, and probably not worth getting into the whole $7 million bond and where all that has gone. I know that's been a big topic of conversation, but at some point somebody's going to have to jump in there and figure all that stuff out, and the legalities of how you restructure that. But you got to start with a vision, and I think just a willingness to go, this really isn't that hard, and we just need to start going somewhere. And a 3-minute GAA meeting, which is what we had, about 3 months ago, following the anywho's, that's not going to get us there. So
you guys don't get a lot of traction in 3 minutes.
No, not much. Let me say this too. One thing we talked about at the roundtable the other day that I thought was pretty interesting is hiring a competent. Not that we don't have competent people working at the airport. We do. We have great guys working there, but their duties are so many. I mean, you got a manager that's pumping gas, mowing grass, sweeping, putting out the popcorn, doing all that stuff, and that shouldn't be his job. My position has always been that we need to hire a competent manager, someone that's educated and competent in airport management. And we were talking earlier that there's colleges that offer degrees in airport management. So there's people out here that's qualified to do that. That same individual will consult with the FAA in relation to things going on at the airport. We have the GAA has paid Neil Schaefer and other consultants large amounts of money to do consulting work for the airport, when we can have one manager that's not only looking at a master plan for the airport and the future development of the airport, but also consulting with the FAA. And we had discussions at the roundtable that it's not. I deal with the FAA a lot. I represent pilots and different matters and things of that nature. They're not scary. I mean, the FAA is really not a scary group to deal with. They're there to help us. You ask them, they'll help you. You ask for money, they'll find it for you. So anyway, I'm just saying we need someone there to manage. That's something we're missing. I think we have to start there first, and then from there we'll grow. When we get competent management at the airport, we'll grow.
And another opportunity there too is, with Auburn's aviation management program, I bet you a nickel you could get some co-ops up here that would love to get some college credit and a little pay to learn and help.
There's tons of opportunity with that, and yes, you just got to be willing to explore and have those conversations.
Even if you get a no, you're no worse off than you were before you asked.
Absolutely. So let's. Somebody brought up a question about the kind of the tie with the mega site, and I'm curious what your perspective of when you look at the mega site and the potential of developing large business out there and its proximity to the airport. What are your thoughts on? Is that an important thing? Is that, do you think most businesses, when they're looking at, hey, what do I do with 1,100 acres? And by the way, across the street, there's an airport. Does that matter to them?
Yes, I think number one, any development we have at the airport should be aviation development.
Right.
Amen.
Usually aviation development is clean industry, so you don't have to worry about all your peripheral smells or stuff like that. I think in any aviation related industry is going to be very, very advantageous to our city and our county.
Okay. Well, thoughts. So from, FedEx moving, the just-in-time world that's out there now, have you got any thoughts on that and that proximity to that mega site, and what could be, or does that matter?
Once you bring the mega site in, then it becomes a different deal instead of just talking an extra 188 acres down there. But that's kind of over my pay grade.
Gotcha.
Even when I was currently employed, I know they have some big distribution sites in different locations.
Well, and what I mean is you got businesses that, large industries are moving stuff. I've heard, I think you get some stuff that are emergency parts flown into Honda that'll end up coming in through our airport and trucked down to Lincoln.
Well, the problem you're always going to run into is you're only 59 miles from Birmingham,
Well,
and there's an interstate.
Having been associated with assembly plants in the past, I can tell you there are many emergencies that occur in an operation that runs 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and the end product is $10,000 of variable product for each unit. There are millions and millions of instances like that cause you to lose your hair.
Yeah, the emergencies that can pop up, when you're running large scale operation, it can quickly justify. I mean, we used to do it all the time in the military with a jet broken. We go, because you got to get it down, and hey, we're doing a big exercise, and we'd throw parts on airliners, and get it down to us as quickly as we could, and I'm sure the airlines don't mind. We probably paid a pretty penny, or the taxpayers probably paid a pretty penny to get it done, but we lose out on a lot of training, and I imagine.
Well, airlines do that too. Is AOG, aircraft on ground. Delta will run out there, and Delta flights an hour and a half, but a United flights in 35 minutes. They put it on United or get the part where they need it as quickly as possible.
All right, so shifting gears. All right, here's a good question. That's we'll start with who appoints the president of the GAA? You want to talk about the current structure?
Well, that's a good question. I was appointed to the GAA August of 21. The chairman of the GAA had resigned, Harry McClendon had resigned, and I filled his position. He was the chairman. When I came on board, the GAA had already appointed Billy Billingsley as the chairman. I'm not sure how that took place because I wasn't there. So I don't know if they have a vote or just pick someone and say he's the new chairman. I can't answer the question. I don't know.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think so. The board, they nominated. I was at that meeting when they nominated Billy Billingsley, and they nominated him, and they voted on him and appointed him the chair. I don't know that his title is actually president, but I think it's same concept. But so how right now the structure to get on the GAA is nomination by the mayor, approved approved by the city council of Gadsden, and that's it. And there's 7 seats, I think.
Right, 5 presently filled. So
I'm not sure why the additional seats are not filled. But that hopefully that answers your question. And we've got tons of content out there, discussions about that structure. The bottom line, I think, is a lot of folks agree that it needs to be restructured in some way. And that's hopefully that kind of drives home the point of basically right now the city of Gadsden owns the airport and makes their own decisions. And, what ended up with the rendering plant was they were making a decision that impacted a lot of us that live across the street, or, within a mile. And it would have impacted a lot more than just the Rainbow City neighbors and Etowah neighbors. So hopefully that answers your question on that.
I think it'd be very promising to promote private ownership of that FBO too, because I think basically what you have right now is nothing but liability almost.
Yep.
And we discussed that at the roundtable the other day. That's the way it ran for a number of years. And I think Mayor Snyder said she worked at the FBO when it was privately owned, but it was privately owned by, and you probably remember that, when FBO was privately ran. Rudy Beaver ran it for a good while, and I can't remember the other guy. But
Weaver Construction had it before then.
Sure did. And ran the maintenance shop. It was privately owned when we had a maintenance shop, which was fairly busy.
Yes, and you could encourage flight training, charters, rentals, and stuff like that, and you could actually require it.
Well, I think there's somewhere in the bylaws that is required that the FBO maintain a twin-engine airplane and a single-engine airplane for flight training, and we don't have it. I mean, the airport doesn't have it. And the only flight training we have, and I'll throw a shout out to him. Cofield Aviation does a great job of flight training at the airport. Kevin Cofield's
Yes.
great guy, great instructor, does a really good job. So,
Well, and I didn't necessarily want to dive into all this, but we did have a question about flight school, flight training, and we don't need to necessarily get into all the 141 versus all the different FARs on how that goes. But the question that was asked is, does flight training have to be done by an accredited university?
No.
And yeah, and I know we've talked about the seaplane stuff. Now there are some differences as they've made requirements with ours. There's some benefits to going through an accredited flight school. And again, we don't need to get into all the FAR AIM.
I would speculate that even a 141 approved school probably concurrently offers Part 61 training at the same location in the same airplanes.
So, and when you say Part 141, it's a different categorization, typically associated with some sort of
a little more rigidly structured.
That's when you think about like a Emory-Riddle or Auburn has a program. So there are accredited, and I know as a military guy, and this is one where how do you make it nice to attract vets? The post 9/11 GI Bill will actually pay for flight training, but it has to be done at a Part 141 school. So you get a lot of military guys that would probably show up to go to Gadsden State and spend their GI Bill going through their flight training because
Sneed College has a program at the Etowah Airport.
Yep. And so, but there can be, so there is, if you want to go learn to be a pilot, and you could fly the big jets, the 777s one day. If you went out to Cofield Aviation and started there and built your hours, it would be a long path, but you could get there. So hopefully
and the path is accelerating these days.
Yeah.
I mean, the need is there and people see it, and the investment is just steep on the front end, but they can see the rainbow, the end of the rainbow. I mean, these kids, they go in and they dive in the deep end.
Well, and I think, companies like Delta are partnering with some universities. I want to say they partnered somewhat with Auburn in some way.
Yeah. Yes, they did.
And so you've got, the demand is that high that you've got the majors, the major airlines, the major aviation entities are looking at, if I understand it correctly, doing like what the military does, where they say, hey, we'll pay for your school, and then you owe us 8 or 10 years of your life to flying, which is how I ended up, as a navigator in the Navy. They sent me through flight school. They paid for my college, went through flight school, and then, I couldn't leave the Navy until I'd given them 8 years after winging, 6 years. I can't remember what it was now. But I ended up staying on duty. But now you've got airlines that are kind of looking at that model. Is that right?
That's correct. And I got a letter from Middle Tennessee State University the other day, MTSU. They're changing airports near the college there. But I ran the math. They're flying so much, they're running about $240,000 a month in just fuel. I mean, you don't, if you're making a nickel there on a gallon, you may be making some money.
Yep.
And I also read recently that the aviation program at Auburn is the highest earning program at the university 10 years post graduation. So maybe, if somebody wants to get in around here and cash in on some of that.
And that all goes to getting the airport to where it's self-sustaining. If it's making enough money off of those things, then we don't have to worry about the $1 million a year coming out of Gadsden. It's getting paid for. You got to have more stuff going on that's generating the revenue.
Right, and it's like, you can't just wait on the $1 deal. If you get somebody out there making 20 nickels, you wind up with $1. Avionics shop, paint shop that's there, schools, A&P school. I mean, there's a lot of opportunities to make enough money that's worthwhile to pursue, and it all adds up.
So we got a good question in here, and Shannon, I appreciate you dropping some good questions. When the large grants to small airports went out a month ago or so, why didn't Gadsden get a piece of that money? You're talking about state level funds that went out, I believe.
Federal.
Federal, I think.
Was it all federal?
Federal.
Okay. What I'll start. What are your thoughts on why we didn't get any?
You got to have a grant writer.
You got to ask.
You got to have programs. You got to ask for the money. They're just not going to dole it out to you just on your premises. You have to have a grant writer.
And I agree with that. FAA is looking at numbers. They like numbers. They like numbers of flights into an airport. Is it growing? And we've got to attract the flights. I mean, I'm not talking about commercial flights. I'm talking about airplanes flying into Gadsden. Right. They look at numbers, and the more numbers is more likely. Well, first of all, you got to have the grant writer to write the grant to get it, but then you have to show them you have the numbers to support it and the need for it. So the reason we're on the tail end of the receiving money is I think we get money. The FAA comes in, the state comes in, looks at runways and then disrepair and lights in disrepair, and they give us money to fix those things. We don't get any money to do any like building a new FBO or anything of that nature. The airports that do that are very proactive. Gulf Shores International, proactive. New FBO, $20 million FBO now with a terminal, new tower. I can just keep going on with the airports just doing that, but they're proactive. Panama City, the international airport over there. But we'll have to get to the point where we have people that are interested in the airport to get that money. But the money's there, and I said before, the FAA is not scary. We have to have someone that can talk to the FAA, and like you said, we ask for it. We get a grant writer, someone that understands, someone that doesn't mind asking, and we'll get the money and show them a need. Because we can have a need in Gadsden. The airport's been there before. It grew from a small military field that they just left, the government just left to Gadsden, and then it grew for years and years and years, and then it's been in bad repair for a long time now.
Well, and I guess you talk about the need, and the need drives the growth. So and back to people saying, why don't we have FedEx flying in and out of Gadsden? Does it just come down to simply there's just not a need?
Pretty much. I mean, you've got a nice little airport, but the minimums are high. You don't have a control tower. Airline operations don't like uncontrolled fields.
Right.
And we flew into them, but by exception.
Okay.
I mean, your approaches out here, 3/4 mile visibility, a standard Category 1 approach is only a half mile. So you're starting 50% in the hole.
Okay.
And, big airlines.
We'll see if people are sticking along with you on all that stuff. But
well, we paid for the equipment to go to a Cat 3. I mean, I could land with zero ceiling and 300 feet of visibility.
So what he's talking about, guys, is if you see the videos on TikTok or on social of you're sitting there staring at an airport in the clouds and you don't see anything, and all of a sudden a giant airplane appears and is landing basically in a cloud. That's what you're talking about.
Right. And like I say, you'd have to have a control tower and you'd have to be able to protect. You couldn't have trucks running around near the end of the runway or something like that. I mean, you're talking millions of dollars from where we sit right now.
Well, let me say this.
Michael, it all boils down to having a plan, a long-range plan and a short-range plan. And you develop your projects accordingly. And then you have to sell them to the FAA. It's very simple. It's not rocket science.
It's true.
And like I say, there's a lot of opportunities out there. I mean, you could have an FAA medical examiner on the field that people flew into.
Right.
An older semi-retired doctor that showed up 2 days a week and, people just landed and got their medicals, uniform shot.
All the things we say we're lacking at the airport can be had in no time.
Right.
I mean, Gulf Shores didn't have an international airport 2 years ago. They have a tower now. They didn't have a tower 2 years ago. They have a tower now. They have an international airport now. They have flights starting on August 31st, commercial flights coming into the Gulf and the Gulf Shores.
Well, and so the point to the need and developing a plan, to me, is even a bigger picture. We've got to have the population base, whether you want to talk commercial or whether you're moving packages. You've got to have a population that needs to be moved, right? And, we've got to have a plan that brings more people into the community, not causes us to slowly decline, and growth, which then there creates the need for companies like FedEx or other, airlines or whatever to invest the money. So it's not necessarily just build it just to build it. But to your point, we just need a plan. So
with what we've got to start with, enhanced by a plan. I mean, I talked to a friend of mine the other day that flies Gulfstreams, and he said the airport with the existing 6,800 feet, to take and load that thing up to the max and take off and go straight to Stuttgart, Germany without a fuel stop. That's a nice, capable airplane, and 6,800 feet will get that thing off the ground.
Yep.
You've got a good, you're not deficient,
right,
as it sits.
And I hope, so not having a tower and all that kind of stuff, that's a whole nother level of capability. But as it sits out there right now, it's actually one of the more capable airports in our area.
Well, he's flown a lot of jets, but most pilots, myself included, would rather go into a small airport. If I'm going to I'd rather fly into Gadsden than I had Birmingham. I'd rather fly into Gadsden, drive to Birmingham than I had flying to Birmingham on busy days.
Yep.
So.
Can
I say?
Go ahead.
One thing I've been meaning to say that most people, I don't know if most people know it or not, the airport's closed on Sunday. It's been something that always bothers me. You look surprised.
You're kidding.
I will tell you. Most people, when I say that, they're like, the airport is closed on Sundays. Most airports, even the smallest of small airports, are open on a Sunday from noon to 6 or 7 at night. We're closed completely on Sunday. It's self-serve, if you can get self-service on Sunday. So,
well, I posted a
photo.
It is, I swear.
Posted a photograph the other day on the site, and a friend of mine, a girl I went to college with, they own a little FBO down in South Alabama, and there wasn't an empty seat at that little FBO cafeteria. They give away free breakfast if you will buy gas.
Oh, yeah.
There were 20 people in there, all military that you could see, but civilians are welcome also. But that picture just happened to be full of flight suits.
Well, and I always wanted to bring an airplane when I was going through flight school. I always want to bring an airplane up here. That's what we do when you go through flight school. That's the way that you generate extra training. Is we train 5 days a week, and then a bunch of the airplanes leave with instructors and students, and you go get more training on the weekend, and they can shut down the military airfield. I could never bring an airplane up here out of Pensacola, Florida. And this was, I was married. My wife is from here. That's why I wanted to come up here. And I couldn't do it because we didn't have the paperwork on file for me to hand them a Navy credit card to pay for the fuel. And that always made me frustrated because, I'll never forget the red beans and rice and baguettes and fresh ice cream at New Iberia down in South Louisiana. You go out there at lunchtime and there'd be rows of Navy trainer airplanes getting thousands of dollars of fuel pumped in them. And we're excited because we get to go spend $5 on a really good lunch. We're pretty simple people in the military. It doesn't take all that much. And, and they're making how much money off of selling fuels just because they got the paperwork in place. And I don't know where all that stands. I know a lot of the rules and stuff have changed since I was flying, but that was one thing that, our airport, and we're in an area where we could attract plenty more military stuff, not just the jumpers. And I know that's a great thing that we have going on out there, but they don't actually buy that much fuel when they're here.
Well, it's a very small truck out there. And I was invited to an airport meeting out there before you were on the authority. They didn't have the capability to take a government credit card. That's like Walmart not taking American Express. We only take Visa. What? I don't understand.
That goes with the manager.
Yeah.
And there are issues out there that need to be enhanced also, like the fire protection and stuff like that.
We could go down
opportunities,
a deep,
but like you say, grant money will buy a fire truck just as easy as our direct tax money will.
So we'll get back to the economic development side of things. There's a good question out here from Danny Starnes. Based on the community plan, is there a place for outside investors to build out hangars and such. I think, Danny, you're referring to the plan that the alternate proposal that got put together. But I mean, just in general, can we? It doesn't necessarily have to be just the city. And
They have outside investors now, don't they, Ken?
They do. That lease the hangars. The problem is you got an investor that comes in and puts a lot of money. They build a hangar with a lease situation that reverts back to the city at some point, or the GAA, and they pay rent for all those years and then lose their investment.
Right. And I think that number is about 20 years is one of the
it's fairly short.
20 or 30. I think they're having a hard time making it economically feasible.
Yeah,
in 20 years.
You can't do it. I mean, most of the guys that I've talked to that are ready to build a hangar and pay for a hangar, even just for private use right now, I think their hang up is it's 20 years. And some people might say, well, most airports you're talking in the 40, 50, even a 99-year lease, particularly if you are a company like an aircraft maintenance facility and you want to come in and build a very substantial thing. If all of that reverts back, is 20 years long enough to recoup the investment?
I talked to a friend of mine in Shelby County, Tennessee, the other day, and it's just hard to get the economic payback on a 20-year, but a 30 is working for general aviation hangars, storage hangars.
So yeah, that becomes tough for private. I mean, certainly and I believe Albertville's model. In listening to, as I know, Lance Corey, obviously, if you've learned anything about airports in the last 2 years, you probably read some stuff from him. And I know Heather New's been up there to look at Albertville's model, but basically they don't take private investors. They build the facility for them and then turn around and rent it. And they make it beneficial to attract the business in, and then whatever they recoup the money through the rent and attracting the business. And then of course you can't forget, I mean, it's not just that simple when you're talking about an airport like that. I mean, and particularly if we've got an occupational tax, if they bring a business in that's got 20 employees, now they're making occupational tax off of all those employees. So it's not just that the airport is this standalone entity. You've got to look at it in a bigger picture. And
the maintenance shop, which is a large maintenance shop at Albertville Airport, talking about Albertville Airport, is ran by, managed and owned by a gentleman from Gadsden. Drives up there, has been for years.
Interesting.
And, years ago when I learned out there, they had a little cafeteria out there. And we would drive out there to eat, even if we weren't out there. I mean, the food was great. And, it was back in Southern Airways days, they would always call in range and order their food. And, I think sometimes they'd buy gas just where they had time to eat with waiting on the gas, using it as an excuse to have a chance to have their strawberry milkshake and their steak sandwich.
Well, I made many a flight to Rome, Georgia, Pale City when they had a restaurant there just to eat Saturdays, Sundays.
Yep. Yeah, a lot of missed opportunity here.
Yeah.
So I think looking through, I think we've covered, there's some pretty detailed questions, and we definitely probably can go spend some time. You'll see folks jump in the comments and answer some of these questions. But I think one to kind of close on and lead us into a closing area, because we've been actually going for a while. And this is a long one. What is the path forward? No, let me get it up on the screen. Sorry. What is the path forward for the Gadsden Airport if the majority of the GAA board members have as many as 6 years left to their appointments, but seem they lack the aptitude or interest to manage the airport needs? What are your thoughts on what's the way forward for the airport if we've got folks on there that are still sitting with 6 years of time on that board?
It would be entirely inappropriate to say punt on third down because it usually surprises everybody. Right?
I don't know. Thoughts on the current, what's the way forward for the GAA, the way forward for the airport? Develop a plan?
I don't have a plan. that's a difficult question to answer with the state law like it is, and I believe it operates under the state law. The state law has to be changed. It has to be changed with the new administration, and we're stuck with this organization we have right now for a while because things move very slowly at the state level. So we're going to have to live with what we have for God knows how much longer. And these are all good men. They have their differences. They have their differences, and they. I don't want to say they're not non-qualified. Yes, that's a good word. They're non-qualified. They're good men, but they're non-qualified to be in a position they're in. What we need are professionals in the operation of the GAA, and quite frankly, that's going to be a while coming.
Okay. Well, hopefully that meeting, Heather getting the group together and whoever's elected mayor, having the state reps, all of your state legislators, the senator, hopefully that's at least a start to move things at the state level, and agree to sit down and dedicate the time to look at it.
Yeah, I felt positive leaving the meeting the other day, the round table where we had local, state, and federal people there committing to do what it takes to make the airport work.
And you've got surrounding mayors that are willing to sit there and go, hey, we may have to take on our fair share, and certainly as a Rainbow City resident, hey, it may hit me a little bit in the tax, some way or some shape. I don't know. That's got to be figured out, but it makes sense. I'm worth it. I think it's worth it to explore that. But you've got, the mayor sitting there going, all right, well, we got to figure out how to do this, and work together as a community, which I think is a bigger conversation that everybody's having. Is we've got to figure as a county how to develop a plan and go out and execute the plan. And it doesn't seem like that's been a thing in our community, as far as I can tell. Y'all been around here a couple of years more than I have. So I don't know, to answer the makeup. I don't know. I mean, it could happen kind of quick. We'll see, but you may be stuck with what you got for a while. Yeah, so let's leave it with general thoughts on the current state of things. We've been talking airport, economic development some. General thoughts on the state of things, which, I value because y'all have all been in and around this community a whole lot longer than I have. You've seen a lot more things. You've been to a lot of different communities, been involved in a lot of different things. Where do you think things stand right now as Etowah County, not just the airport, but as Etowah County as a whole? And where are we? Does that make sense? Am I asking that in an appropriate way? I'll start with you, and we'll wrap this up.
Okay. I think we're at a positive position right now due to the fact that we had a bad experience with a rendering plant attempting to come here. People are united now.
Turn the lights on.
Yeah. And I think people are aware of what we have. And a lot of people didn't, like you said, a lot of people didn't know about the airport, that we even had an airport. And not just sticking with the airport, but Etowah County in general. I think people now are going to demand transparency, the openness, with the meetings, and no more good old boys and closed door conversations and things being planned and done for the benefit of whoever without ever consulting the community. That's going to change. So I think our community right now is in a good posture to move forward with the right administration to be elected, and the right group of people running the airport, running the county, running the city. I think it's on a positive note now. I think the people are interested. They sat idle for a number of years, but I think they're interested now. And I think they see that you get behind it, you get behind the thought, and you can make it work. And that's where we're at now. But I think Etowah County is in a good position. I think Gadsden's in a good position. We just need the right people. Like you said, we need people to manage it and get a plan, and we'll go places.
Russ?
I think you have a lot of opportunity on a variety of levels. I mean, you can just keep dipping that Neapolitan ice cream and get every flavor. I mean, training, maintenance, just there's tons
of
opportunity. Connections with Auburn, MT, different colleges. I mean,
so we're sitting in a good spot.
But the problem is it's sat there a long time.
Gotcha.
In real estate, you'd take this one off the market and put it back up in 30 days for it to pop up like a new listing.
Well, Mr. Floyd, what are your thoughts on where Etowah County, where we stand? I know you've been writing some articles on it.
I think the city of Gadsden and the county of Etowah has been not so much the county, but the city of Gadsden has been a result of benign neglect. I think I agree with everything that Ken said. I think the political environment is completely changed in Gadsden. People are asking questions. They want answers. And now I think with the environment the way it is, they're going to get answers. So I think the changes that are going to be made after the coming elections are going to be very positive for the city of Gadsden.
Well, I guess with that, guys, thanks for those of you that have been watching. And to that end, a lot of you engaged, asking questions, and that's what we've got to keep doing. I'm one of those people that was kind of asleep and not paying much attention, and I got the phone call about what they wanted to build and how it was going to impact my friend Jonathan McCormick, and then how it would eventually impact me at my house. So I'm not done asking questions, and I certainly want as much transparency as possible. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming and sitting down and taking your time to share your thoughts. Hopefully you guys have gotten something out of it. I hope you read John's articles and keep an eye on the airport authority as we move forward with all that stuff. Ken has been a good champion for I'll say expertise and common sense on that board, and much appreciated. And Russ's insights into the world of professional aviation and the what ifs, the what could be's, I think a lot of that, and Lance Corey, I'm definitely going to give you some credit, because you've been pounding your fists for a long time and educating a lot of people as much as you can. But keep paying attention, and just don't forget, I think a lot of the issues that we have at the airport that's not the only place we have those issues. The types of issues and what I've talked about over and over again is that the rendering plant was a symptom of an underlying problem we have in this community. And I think if you take a lot of this stuff and apply it into a lot of different areas, it's all going to be about the same conversation, if that makes any sense, and I hope it does. So, guys, August 23rd, if you're a Gadsden voter, get out there and vote. If you're not a Gadsden voter, then if you're the one at your workplace and you've got Gadsden voters there, you're the one that they come to for political talk. Hey, what's going on? Please tell them, educate them, because we've got to pay attention. This is, I think, one of the most important elections, certainly in my lifetime, that we'll have here in Etowah County. And yes, it is a city Gadsden election, but it is going to impact our entire county and, in fact, our entire region. So, guys, y'all have a great day. And, well, I guess we'll see you in the next one. We got a few more lives coming up this week. More on that